Inflation comes in at 1.6% and it's absolutely crashing, and the Canadian dollar is once again in free fall. So let's get into this and see what's going on here. So inflation rate drops to 1.6% in September. So obviously the mainstream media would lead you to believe that this is fantastic news. The Bank of Canada has achieved its target, and all in the midst of no recession, no economic slowdown. Of course, we know this is complete BS, and we're going to get into the actual data of what's going on, but it's very interesting. So inflation dropped to 1.6%. No kind of idea, and the mainstream media not asking the question, how and why has it dropped so fast? Because when you look at inflation month over month, we have seen some deflation, some actual deflation month over month, which means prices going down. Now, this is the CPI after all, so it's not very trustworthy, but it does show the trend. So you can see that prices are slowing, but we've only seen in the last year, we've seen 4 months out of 12 where, guess what? Inflation has actually been negative. And if you look at how positive it's been, you've seen a lot of inflation. Still, core inflation hasn't really done a lot. You've only seen 3 months that are negative, and that obviously excludes gasoline and food and all those different things, which is dragging down the number. So if you look at what's happened here, inflation, the CPI peaked out at 8.1%. It's now all the way down at 1.6%. So you've seen inflation slow significantly, but the mainstream media is not asking the question, why? How did that happen? And obviously there's a reason why that happened, and we'll get into it. The economic data is showing how bruised the economy is in Canada. Obviously, we know it's in a recession. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to work that out. It'll be a long time before the mainstream media admits that. So anyway, Canada's inflation rate fell to 1.6% in September, Statistics Canada reported. The data agency said the numbers marked the smallest year-over-year increase to the consumer price index since February 2021. Lower gasoline prices, which fell by 10.7% on a yearly basis, drove inflation down last month. With gasoline excluded, the all items inflation rate came in at 2.2%, the same as August. And obviously, this is going to impact what the Bank of Canada does. And that's what everybody's thinking about, is what the Bank of Canada is going to do. Obviously, unemployment, the trend there. We're setting a trend. It's going up from the lows that we saw in around 2022. You've seen 2 years pretty much of significant increase in the unemployment rate. This trend cannot be ignored, and it's just going to continue, because what the Bank of Canada has done and what the mainstream media isn't admitting is they've crushed the economy, because the economy is built on debt. So when you put up interest rates by a lot, it's going to have a huge impact on the economy. It's going to be delayed, and that crushes the economy. They haven't actually controlled inflation. What they've done is crushed the economy in order to bring inflation down. So what they're doing is not directly impacting inflation like you would think. It's actually happening through the consumer, which is who they're really targeting and crushing. So think in the future how this is going to play out, because nobody would have envisioned this happening 2 or 3 years ago, would have envisioned the Bank of Canada hiking interest rates by as much as they did. So anyway, it's kind of crazy, and we'll get into it. So rent prices increased at a slower pace in September, rising 8.2% year over year compared to 8.9% in August, with slower growth in Newfoundland and Labrador, New Brunswick, and BC. And when you get into rent inflation, guys, I mean, look at this chart. Rent inflation, if you actually pull this out, it just looks absolutely ridiculous. Like, you cannot ignore how high rent inflation is right now, and we are seeing rents pulling back, especially on bigger properties, which is happening across the major cities, even in the places where you're still seeing lots of people move to. Ottawa, Montreal, Quebec City, Calgary, Edmonton, Halifax, the usual suspects where a lot of people are moving to, but the economies aren't supporting those people there either anymore. So eventually they're going to realize that's going to slow down. The bust is going to come into those markets as well. It's just very cyclical, and we see see this happening time and time again. So gas prices, the main thing that is driving down inflation here, and obviously the Bank of Canada is going to use this to cut by more. They want to cut interest rates. They want to bring interest rates down right now because they think that there's actually a real interest rate out there because inflation is lower than the interest rates that they have set right now. So you're getting an actual real return by just putting your money in the bank, and they don't like that. They don't like that at all. They want to make sure that they're devaluing the currency as much as possible, and that's really happening, and you're seeing that with the price of goods and services that are skyrocketing, and they're not coming back. They might slow down, but they're not coming back, especially on the things that you need. So the Consumer Price Index, September 2024, again, even Statistics Canada saying gasoline was the main driver in which why this Consumer Price Index came down, the CPI. And when you look at it and break it down, you can see here really easily food is still up well above the Bank of Canada's target. Obviously, we know record amount of Canadians go into food banks right now in desperate need right now. So obviously, with food prices being so elevated right now, you're just going to see continued pressure on these food banks as more and more people just cannot afford these increases that just keep on happening. Because yeah, inflation's coming down, but it's just slowing the growth of inflation. Inflation's still going up, prices are still rising, and this is just a lie. This is not a factual report by any means, but it gives us an idea of trend, which is why we look at these types of reports. Shelter inflation, obviously very elevated, and then you're seeing all the things that you don't need, especially clothing and footwear, that are decreasing in price, and then you've got health, personal care, and you've got alcohol, tobacco, and other products that are rising in price, which probably goes hand in hand with more and more people that are depressed and mentally stressed out right now, relying more on abusing substances, which is never a good sign. And then you can see on this chart, gasoline prices, huge decline, even though you look at the pumps and you think, wow, like gasoline prices are still way higher. And obviously that's because of the carbon tax. There's far more taxes that are in the fuel right now. So even though the actual fuel prices come back down, nobody's really seeing that much relief there, which is kind of crazy. Obviously, this rent inflation being so elevated, never a good sign, putting massive pressure on households. People just cannot afford to pay their rent. You're going to see more and more tenants that are defaulting on their rent, unable to pay it. It is really not a good time to be a landlord, in my opinion. Unemployment rate, you're going to see that continue. And obviously, we've got the Bank of Canada coming out this week. So after this inflation report was released, you saw a massive decline. This is a weekly chart of the Canadian dollar, which has kind of been bouncing back and forth all this time this year. And you've seen this basically come down again towards this low. Obviously, we set that new low, and then we went on a nice rally there in the Canadian dollar, got all the way above 74 cents, and now it's come straight back down. I mean, it's kind of crazy when you look at this chart, how fast it just falls back down to these lows here. And if we break these lows, then yeah, it's going to be going down to possibly even 68 cents, which is not a good thing. And it's going to be very interesting to watch the Canadian dollar when the Bank of Canada comes out with their announcement this week, and we'll see what happens with that. Is it going to decline? Is it already baked into the market that they know the Bank of Canada is going to be weak? Because obviously FX markets are forward looking, so they saw the CPI number came out and they're anticipating that the Bank of Canada is going to come in with a bigger rate cut. So this could already be baked in and we could see nothing. It could take a while for us to break this low here, because if you look at how many times it's bounced off this low around the 72 cents area, then we could still maintain this. But it's interesting to watch it at this point because it is at one of those pivot points. So if you get a crucial piece of economic data or news that the FX market did not know about or was not anticipating, then yeah, you could see it break straight through that low, and then the low becomes the new resistance level. So we'll have to see what happens with the Canadian dollar. And obviously, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. You know what's happening here. You're seeing more and more job lines. I mean, the amount of people that have been imported to Canada, unbelievable over the past couple of years. And the economy obviously is in dire straits right now. We know it's in a recession. We know what the Bank of Canada has had to do in order to get this inflation inflation down. We know that they have crushed the economy because this is a debt-based economy after all, and it's highly leveraged, and it's not very productive anyways because you've got it mostly revolving around government and real estate, two things that are probably the most least productive in an economy. So obviously you're going to see continued economic weakness. So we'll continue to monitor what happens with the inflation report, what happens with the Bank of Canada's rate decision this week. It's going to be very interesting, so stay tuned for the channel for that. And anyway, guys, I want to thank you so much for watching this video. If you've enjoyed this video, highly recommend that you check out this video here. And if you're looking for a VPN, check out this link here, expressvpn.com/market mania. That's the VPN that I use, affiliate link in the description. I will see you